the second bit's around that. So let's have a look at this. Simple question, the largest city in Victoria. Call it out if you know it. A harder question is, what's the largest city in Yorkshire? Probably not a harder question for David.
Leeds.
Oh, Leeds, is it? Oh.
But it's certainly a harder question. If we look at a maths question, it's fairly simple, low-level, year 8, 9 maths question. I won't embarrass you by asking anyone in the room to answer it. Here's a harder one. And my question is this intellectual stretch? Are the second examples intellectual stretch? And I don't think they are. In fact, I'm convinced they're not. They're harder questions, but they don't require harder thinking. Okay? The first example, you either know it or you don't. If you don't know it, you can Google it. Right? The second one, it's got fractions in it and it's got a negative sign. It makes it harder. It's the one at the end of the little section of maths questions that you get rather than the first one. But it's still a fluency question. It doesn't require problem solving, reasoning, understanding. So they're harder questions, but they don't require hard thinking. Luckily, I've got time to share this beautiful example with you. Did some work with some students around cells, and they were co-designing some work, and we asked them to find some really good problem-solving questions that they can use for inquiry with other kids. And we gave them some resources, some textbooks, they looked on the internet, etc., etc. And kids came up and said, oh, I found one. This, right in the bottom corner, almost obscured from you in one of the textbooks, was this little bit that said problem solving. Thought, you be, what's the problem? And it was this. Draw a labelled diagram of the human body showing all of the major organs. Now, it didn't take long for the kids to actually start questioning, was that actually a problem solving question? In fact, this guy, thanks Captain Google, 5.7 seconds, and the kid had answered the question. So clearly there wasn't a lot of problem solving going on. So we started talking about the notion of non-Googleable questions. In fact, it's become a thing, hasn't it? Non-Googleable questions. But you can Google non-Googleable questions and find out what it is. But it's around the hard thinking. And so we got the kids then to say, okay, come up with a whole stack of what-if questions around this. And the kids came up with their own, well, what if, and they were quite good. And then that little naughty kid that's always sitting over here that's really quite clever, but naughty, put his hand up and said, what if you didn't have a hole in your bottom? Now, he'd done an amazing amount of problem-solving and strategic thinking already, because he'd come up with the rudest answer he could find that answered the question so he couldn't get in trouble. Really clever thinking. But what we did with that is we allowed the kids to say, right, pick any one of the what-if questions you like and spend 30 minutes, go off and find out as much as you can about them. We didn't ask them to find out the answer. In 30 minutes' time, they had to come back and say whether they thought it was an engaging question or not, and whether it required hard thinking. And clearly, what if our bottom didn't have a hole in it was one of those. Because the kids were a phenomenal amount of work done in half an hour to find out what would happen. They were looking at digestion, what happens in the lower intestine, right the way through to one kid actually came back with the answer. We'd be like a starfish. What? Well, the starfish they eat, they take the nutrients out that they need, and the waste comes back out of the same hole. And then you can imagine the kids reaction, you're peeing out of your mouth. And it's just brilliant engagement level through the roof. But it was all of a sudden, it's amazing, these what-if questions. So the second part of the toolkit will be around that, about what is actual intellectual stretch. And so there's a whole range of